Hey everyone, it's Justin from DAX Noob, and today I'm going to go over two questions that were posted in the Power BI Reddit channel. Um, the solutions have already been found, but I wanted to walk through my thought process as I was examining them and yes, walk you a little bit more detail step by step of how to solve similar challenges. All right, so this first question is from Applied Cello, and they say, I am new to Power BI and measures, and I'm trying to create a measure that filters out projects where the grand total row shows 0. I'm using a matrix visualization with projects as the row value in my date column hierarchy in my dates table, with year and month, and my values is my measure. And so they provide the measure here. Okay, so this generally works great, although clunky, on the row level, but my column total in the matrix is still calculating all the project values instead of just summing the projects where the grand total is non-zero. In other words, my dates table variable is filtering out the correct projects, but the actual matrix is calculating all projects instead of just summing the filtered ones. Hope this makes sense, and any help is appreciated. So the original poster graciously provided me a Power BI sample file. So if we look here, if you notice, for instance, for the year 2017, um, the project B and C are the only projects that are displayed. But when you look at the total, the sum is not adding up to the individual projects that are still being displayed. And if I was able to export the data and take a look at why this might be the case. And if you notice here, project A is $113, and if you were to add up all three of these values, you get that 125. So it looks like project A having has a grand total value for the row is 0, but the amount is still being included in the grand total for the column. So let's take a look at the measure and see if we can identify what is going on. So if we go here to the grand total row, so the first thing that I would do is one is format the measure, because it's kind of hard to understand what's going on if you don't. So you can go through and do it manually. I do suggest that you get into the habit of formatting as you go, as you're writing DAX, so that you have a better understanding of the structure, and it just helps you to have more, like I would say, more control over what you're doing, and it's easier to debug. But you can also use the great website daxformatter.com. So if I go there, you can just copy your measure, paste it into the text box, and then click format, and it will provide you this nicely formatted version of your measure. So copy, paste that in here. So if we examine the measure, there's two main parts. There's this grand total variable. There's this dates table variable, and then we are returning this dates table variable. It looks like they have a very similar structure, where we are iterating over the combinations of project and date. We are getting the sum of the amount column, rounding it to 2 decimal places, and then taking that result and dividing it by the number of number of combinations of project and date. And then for this first variable, we are taking all that, updating the filter context, where we're removing every date filter, or every filter applied to the date table except for any filter on the date itself. And then for the second variable, we're doing a similar pattern. The only difference being is we're not modifying the filter context, but we are taking this grand total that we calculated up here, and as we iterate over this project and date combination, we are getting rid of any row, or we're only keeping rows where this grand total is not equal to 0. And so a couple things that I would note is that this grand total variable, um, when you have a variable and it's evaluated within a given filter context, it's almost more like a constant. So even though the original poster is calling this or referencing this variable as they're iterating over this project and date combination table, where it's not equal to 0, that value is never changing. So if we take this grand total row and we return here and see like what it produces, you'll see that it's giving me the value for the total row for every single row here, and then the same thing for project A. So why that's excluding everything for project A, and it's kind of like working for this row, it's because, well, for every single row, for every single value, it's returning 0. So as we're filtering this table, we're always having this condition, filter every single value where 0 is not equal to 0, which is false, so that this table will be empty for every row. But as we're looking at this total row, it's always returning this 489,000 value. So this variable, this expression here will always evaluate the true, and so it will always give you the complete list of projects and dates, and sum up every single project and date, including project A. Also, um, I was able to confirm with the original poster like why this count divided by count rows was being added, and it's because when it wasn't added, it seemed like the totals were being duplicated. So if I remove this here and just kind of leave the more simple expressions and go back here, it seemed like some of these numbers were being duplicated. And the original poster was thinking that if we divide the the summed value by the number of projects and dates, we would be able to get back to the original value. And so if we go back now, and so actually the reason why we're seeing almost duplicate values is not because we're missing some type of division. It's because we are not applying context transition correctly. So as we're iterating over the project and date table here, we're calling the sum of amount. And so this sum of amount, without either being wrapped in a calculate or maybe without this sum my table amount being defined in a measure, which all measures are wrapped in an implicit calculate, this sum of amount isn't taking into account any filter that you might think would be applied in this project in this date. And so what it's giving you is the entire sum of amount within the given filter context. So it'll give you the sum of amount where the project is B and the year is 2016. So in order to get this to work as expected, whenever you're calling some expression in an iterator and you want the filter from that iterator to apply to, or that row context to apply as a filter to the expression that you're iterating or that you're aggregating, you need to wrap it in a calculate like this. And so I can do the same here. And so if we do that, we can kind of get back to the same expression, the same result that we had at the beginning. So now that we're handling context transition correctly, we don't need the divide by count rows. So the issue is still here though of why are we including this total like project A still in the total? So really to solve this issue, we need to have some type of mechanism that for each cell, regardless of the filter context, we are iterating over each project and filtering out any project where the total row is 0. And then we can then sum up all of the amounts for any project that is not excluded. So what I would do is I would actually start overwriting this problem. And so as we do this, we want to iterate over oh, it's not working. Let's try here again. IntelliSense was not showing up. So values, oh, I probably had the wrong thing. So values of my project. And so what we want to do is we want to filter these projects, and we want to be able to filter these projects out where we are only including projects where that grand total, like the row total row, um, will be a non-zero value. So the way to do that is we can create some expression where we know it's going to be some form of the sum of amount, but we want to modify the filter context where we can do all except. So we want to remove all filters except the filter that's currently on the project. So that as we're iterating over this project, we can remove the filters, maybe from the dates, from the columns, and so on. If you're fine excluding all filters, this will work. If there's any other filters that you need to keep, you can add it to the all except, or you can explicitly remove certain filters by saying maybe remove filters on the year, um, the month, so on. So this could work, but I'm going to go back to our previous way of doing the all except of my table. So removing all filters from the table and the expanded table, but still keeping the filters for the project. All right, so now that we have this list of, well, actually one more thing where we have to say where this expression here is not equal to 0. And then once we have this list of projects, we can do a couple things. One, we can just then iterate once more over this list of projects, and the expression we want to sum then is just all of the amount. Oops. Calculate the sum of the amount of these projects. And again, we need to have that wrapped in a calculate. So as we're iterating, it will change the filter, the row context of this project to be the filter context. And if I click submit, we are almost there, except now we see that this amount, our project A, is still visible. And the issue is that even though it says 0 here, it's probably some non-zero value that's close to 0. And so we need to restore what the original poster included, rounding that result to a number with only 2 decimal places. So let's go, and just for the sake of readability, I'm going to say var raw total is going to be equal to this here. We'll say rounded total is going to be the round of our raw total, only to 2 decimal places. And then our result is going to be where the rounded total is not equal to 0. And then we will return our result. Sweet. So now if we go back and look, perfect. So our project A is gone. We only have project B and C, and it looks like now that the total value is the sum of the values in B and C. So you can write it like this. There's other ways that you can write it. You could, it's my preferred way. I'm going to steal everything that I have in this filter statement, and I will call this valid projects, just to kind of not have iterators within iterators. You can put all of the valid projects in this variable here. You can then keep the iteration the same if you wanted to. So now we'll still iterate over the valid projects. It's just a little bit easier to read like this. Or another option would be to, instead of iterating over the list of valid projects or the table of valid projects, you can simply take the sum of the amount column and modify the filter context now to only include those projects that are in the list or in that table of valid projects. So we can say for projects. Oops, the project is in this table of valid projects. You would want to keep filters so that if you are, for instance, on this cell here, it would still take into account project C and project B and C. So just give you project C, but when you are on the total row, it will just include project A, C, and B. And or you can do one final way is a treat as instead of using the keep filters. So we're going to treat this list of projects as our values for the my table projects. And again, this will give you that same result. Okay, and so for this next problem, it's from Big Red Little Hood. They say, I'm working on a monthly report for a utility company, and one of the metrics they're asking for is the percentage of completed projects. Seems pretty basic and straightforward. The calculation they provided is projects received minus discontinued projects divided by projects received. I've been using count A of a project key, and since it's type text and unique, to calculate how many projects there are, and then group/filter using project status. I've attempted a few different DAX calculations, but keep getting either errors or 1, which makes me think the filters aren't being evaluated. This is my closest attempt. No errors, but evaluates to 1. So we have the DAX expression. Even if this seems more complicated than it should be, any help/feedback is very appreciated. All right, so I did not have a Power BI file from the original poster to use, but I am using a version of the Contoso semantic model. And instead of using the projects completed, I'm using customers. And instead of project status, I'm using the country that these customers are from, but was able to take the same DAX measure and see what's going on. So again, the first thing that we are going to want to do is we want to format the measure. So you can either do it yourself or go to daxformatter.com and paste in the DAX, click format, and then copy the formatted DAX. All right, so here we are. And okay, so let's take a high level look at the measure. So we have a valid customers measure where it looks like we're counting the customer keys. We are then filtering all the customer rows where the country is not equal to Italy, or it is not equal to United States, or it's not equal to Canada. Then we're getting a count of all of the customer keys. And then finally, we're returning the valid customers divided by the all customers variable, but only if all customers is not blank. So a couple things to note. One, if customer key truly is the primary key for the dimension that you're aggregating, or it's if it's unique for the table that you're iterating, that you're evaluating, best practice would be to use the count rows function of the entire table instead of count A of the particular column. So in this case, I'm going to use count rows. I'm just going to remove the reference to customer key, and then I'm going to do the same thing here. The second expression. Another thing that we'll want to do is we want to start to test each part of this, because it'll help us to determine where the issue is coming. It could be that the valid customer, like maybe it's the case that our expression here is incorrect. It could be where there are only customers that are not in one of these 3 countries, and so that's the total sum of the customers. So maybe it's expected that if x divided by x is equal to 1, or something else could be going on. But until we start to step through this, we don't really know. So what we're going to do here is in order to easily kind of debug each of these variables, what we'll want to do is instead of returning an expression like this, we're going to define this last expression in a variable itself. We're going to change this now to say return one of these variables at a time. It's best practice to kind of the return statement to be a variable so that you can do this type of debugging. So I'm going to go to all customers, return that, and see what the results are. So we are returning, it looks like 1.8 million customers, and it's ending with the number 84. I will now return all customers. Oops, sorry. Now valid customers. And see what the number is. And it's the same number. So it looks like whatever is being returned from valid customers is the same number that we're getting for this all customers variable. And if that's not expected, then I would say something is going wrong with this valid customers expression here. And so if we take a closer look at this filter that's being applied to the customers table, we'll see what the issue is. So we're saying we want all the rows of the customer table where the country is not equal to Italy, or it's not equal to United Kingdom, or it's not equal to Canada. And if you think about it, because one row of the customer table can only have one country, this expression will always evaluate to true. So let's say that we are on a particular row and the value of the country is Italy. So this will result in a false. But then these two, since the country is Italy, Italy is not equal to the United Kingdom, so that will result in true. And same thing with Italy not being equal to Canada, and that will be true. So the full expression would be false or true, which will be true. So at least two of these three statements will always be true, and so the whole expression will be true. So really what we want to do is we want to change the way that this is written to be where the country is not Italy, and it's not the United Kingdom, and it's not Canada. So we'll just change this operator here to and. So now we're going to look and see what changes with the valid customers. We'll click commit, and then it does then change the number of customers that we're counting, at least for the numerator. So now there's a better way of writing this. Best practice, both for performance and readability, is to not filter tables. We want to filter columns. And so what we'll do here is we can write it a couple different ways. One, we could say just this expression here, because of our when you have multiple calculate modifiers, it's like an and condition that will be added between them. So we could just say, hey, calculate the count rows of customer where it is not in these three countries. Again, we'll just make sure this is giving us the same result. And it is. And then there's even a better way to write this, where we can say where the country is not in this list of three countries. This, where the customer, so I just need to add this not condition here. And then also, since they were using the filter of the existing customer table and they weren't removing any filters from the customer table, we want to have it truly apples to apples what they had before, wrap this in a keep filters. So I'm going to commit that. And again, you can see it's the same result there. So now, if we were to return this final result, we should see then we have some number that's smaller than the total customers. So we should see some number less than 1. But we are seeing 1 still. And so what could be happening? Well, if we check the data type of the measure, it is decimal, we have comma separated, and we are showing 2 decimal places. But if we go to the format pane here and look at the callout value, we're not displaying any decimal places. So if I update this to 2, you can see that it is giving us the correct ratio, that at least for this data set, we're expecting a number of 0.71. And because we had 0 decimal places, it was being rounded up to the nearest whole number, which is 1. And we can actually make one additional change here. So this divide function will actually take care of any divide by 0 errors that we might have. So it looks like that this is what this if statement is trying to avoid. So if this all customers is not well, if it's not blank, only then return the result. It might still cause an error if this all customer value was a 0 and not a blank. So if we do that, we should get a divide. We won't get a divide by 0 error because this divide function here is taking care of that for us. But we can actually get rid of this function here, because if all customers is blank, or if it is 0, it will return that blank for us. We can always have it return some other number like a 0 or some other alternate result, but this should work. And get us to that same 0.71 number. There are other ways that you can do this and write this measure, but this should be able to get us to what the user was wanting to do.